Gage Primario, crushbackpain.com. Today we're going to discuss how discs herniate, particularly lumbar discs. I'm often asked, how did this happen? Why do I have a herniated disc? What's going on? Herniated discs usually occur as a result of cumulative microtrauma. So that's just a term that means over time you move in a way that weakens the back part of your disc, the annulus fibrosus, and the inside part of the disc keeps pushing out against the outside part, keeps making little micro tears, and eventually it gets weak enough so that something that seems relatively harmless, like bending over and tying your shoe or bending over and picking up something light off of the ground, causes the disc to actually herniate. That's usually what happens. Now, you can be picking something heavy up off the ground, doing a heavy deadlift, moving a couch, something like that, and that can cause the disc to herniate as well. But usually, it's because of cumulative microtrauma. And a lot of times, disc herniations occur after being seated for a prolonged period. And the reason is when you're seated, the back part of the disc is basically bulged out. The inside, the nucleus pulposus pushes back against that back part of the disc, and it keeps the disc in that position. And so then the back part of the disc, there's more pressure back there. And then when you get up, if you bend forward farther and do something in a bent forward in a flex position, then you have a likelihood that disc may herniate. I'm going to show you with some models what I'm talking about, because it's a lot easier if you can see it instead of just hearing me talk about it. So I've got a spine model here. This is looking at the spine from the side. Here's the front. Here's the back. So you've got your lumbar spine down here. Here's your pelvis. We've got your hips. So when I'm talking about cumulative microtrauma, I'm talking about ways that we move every day that cause excessive compression through your lumbar disc and excessive pressure through that back part of the disc. And that could be as simple as sitting down and standing up. How many times do you sit down and stand up during the day? Dozens, at least. We all do. So I've got a stool here. So most of us sit down like this. We don't even think about it, and then we stand up like this. We lead with our back. So if you see the spine from the side, this is kind of the natural position of the spine. You've got a lordosis here, that's just that curve, more of a kyphosis here in the thoracic spine, and then a lordosis in your cervical spine. So the natural position of the lumbar spine is to have a lordosis. That's apparent when you stand. You have that kind of hollowing out of the lower back. They refer to that as a lordosis. Now when you sit, that curve reverses and it flexes. So this would be more extension when you're standing with the lordosis. And then when you sit, the spine actually flexes. Now, when the spine flexes, there's more pressure through the disc, and especially the back part of the disc, just because of the position of the lumbar spine. And then if you sit for long periods of the day, you have that constant increased pressure through your lumbar spine. And then when you stand up and sit down, you're getting a little bit of excessive flexion every time. That's just putting constant pressure through that disc. So if every time you stand up and sit down, you're moving more through the back than you need to, you're just getting constant flexion, which is bending forward, and extension through the spine. That actually weakens the disc. Let me show you on a smaller model so you get a better feel for what I'm talking about. So we've got our little vertebral model, front part of the vertebrae, back part, red part's the disc. With that repeated flexion and extension, it's just doing this time and again. And you can see every time I bend forward, anytime I do this or I let my back round out, this happens. That back part of the disc gets pressure put through it. And what causes the disc to herniate is repeated flexion and the microtrauma it causes. And they've done this with a number of studies. So that repeated flexion will eventually weaken the back part of the disc. And then something as simple as bending over to tie your shoe or to pick up a bag is enough to put even more pressure through the disc because the range is greater and the disc herniates out the back. So that's basically how disc herniations occur. And then the other thing that happens is they don't heal because you continue to do the same thing regardless of any injections you get, any medications you take, any movement work you're doing, any exercises, physical therapy you're doing. If you continue to move in that way, it causes the disc to weaken and causes it to bulge out. How can it heal? So the key, if you have a herniated disc, the key is figuring out what movement patterns you're getting excessive flexion in throughout the day. It's usually sitting down and standing up and while you're sitting. Okay, now if you have a different type of job where you're bending forward a lot, and doing stuff down here, you're in that position, obviously that's going to be part of it. For most people, though, it's just standing up and sitting down, really simple. We do it dozens, even hundreds of times a day, and then just being in a seated position. So what you want to do, if you have a herniated disc that's symptomatic, you want to keep the natural curve in your lumbar spine, which is that lordosis we talked about. So when you go to sit down, your spine stays stable, and you sit through your hips. Your spine doesn't even move. So you can sit down and stand up, and this part doesn't even move. All the motion comes through your hips. So you literally just sit down and stand up through your hips. This stays stationary instead of what most of us do, where we go to sit down and this happens, and then we sit like this, and then we go to stand up and this happens, and we do this repeatedly throughout the day. Think about this part of your lower back, your lumbar spine, being a rigid, solid base, and the movement comes through the hips. So here, you can look at me from the side. If I sit right, I'm getting no motion back here. If you can put your hand on my lumbar spine, it's not moving at all. Now, if I go and just do this, like most of us sit, and it doesn't hurt right now, and stand like most of us stand, you'll feel a lot of movement through my lumbar spine, especially if you have a herniated disc. That's going to become problematic. It may be what led to the herniation, and it's most likely what is resulting in the herniation not healing or becoming asymptomatic. So herniated discs occur because of repetitive microtrauma. It's usually cyclical lumbar flexion over time. The way to get around that is to not cyclically flex your lumbar spine. It's to keep your lumbar spine stable, keep that nice natural curve in your lumbar spine. When you move, when you sit down and stand up, or when you do any type of exercises, keep that lumbar spine neutral. We call it neutral. It's where it has a natural curve, and move through your hips. That's how our bodies are built to work. This is built to be stable. We're built to have mobility here through the hips. So if you learn to move that way, it works wonders with lower back pain, and especially herniated discs. If this video helped you, leave me a thumbs up below. Subscribe to the Crush Back Pain YouTube channel. Drop me a line, let me know any questions you have, leave a comment, and check back every week for proven methods to beat back pain permanently.